Hi, I'm Rachel Lancaster, and this is the Magnificent Midlife Podcast. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started, and the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife and sharing some fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now's our time. My guest today is the very fabulous Helen Wills, and I'm absolutely delighted that she's joined me here today. Helen is a lifestyle blogger and a midlife mum of teenagers. She originally started a blog in the voice of her children, and as time has gone on, she's found her own voice, and she's even just very recently started a podcast. She's usually to be found wearing yellow or pink, and she's a whole lot of fun. So welcome, Helen. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I've got my yellow and pink on.
I know. Very good. So I know that, at time of recording this, the UK has just gone on to not quite lockdown, because a real lockdown is what France is doing, where we actually can't go outside unless absolutely necessary. But it's a pretty traumatic week, and I know it's been quite dramatic for you. So I thought I'd address the elephant in the room straight off. How are you coping with coronavirus? Because you have to look after your daughter who has diabetes.
Yeah, so Maddie has type 1 diabetes. It's an autoimmune condition. And we don't know, because children in theory are less susceptible to this illness, or so they tell us. However, because she has this, and because I know how dramatically and quickly blood sugars and the ketones that come with that can change, I'm being ultra cautious with her. So school did ring on Monday and said, because she has a medical condition, we're phoning to say we will support you if you take her out. And at that point, I hadn't wanted to, because, she's actually, other than that, she's a normal kid. She wants to live her life with her mates, do her thing. And she's a bright girl. She's studying for exams. She wants to be part of that. But as the day wore on, I thought, I'm just not sure, because if she ended up in hospital with this, that could be devastating for all of us. So I did take her out. But equally, her little brother, well, I say he's little, he's 12, nearly 13, is still going to school. And so I rang them and I said, I'm sorry, I'm taking him out as well. And I don't care, actually, if you find me. There's no point in keeping her off if he's going into school and bringing home germs to share with her.
It's so difficult, isn't it? It is. I don't quite understand why the schools are still open, certainly in the London area. Because we're supposed to be ahead of the curve kind of thing. But I understand the knock-on effect it will have if they close the schools.
Yeah, it will be awful.
But it's very difficult, isn't it?
It's really hard. It's really worrying. And actually, the problem I've got now, I've just had a big bust up with my son today. The problem I've got now is actually school, because of staff shortages, have taken his year, and the year above 8 and 9 are not in school anymore, because they can't cope with the numbers. But some of his friends are on the Xbox already this morning, and I'm being strict and saying, well, no, 5 hours of schoolwork, if that's what you'd be normally doing, so that's what you're doing. Because she is in kind of not complete isolation, because we're not ill, none of us are ill. She's in kind of self-isolation. She's just being super careful. He then can't go out with his friend who has a cough, in case that cough is coronavirus. And he's not ill, and if he gets it, he'll be fine probably, but his sister might not be. So it's tough on him.
That was one of the things I was going to ask you, actually, was the whole issue of living with teenagers in particular. I think I read on one of the threads that you'd got on social media that somebody had said, my child hasn't spoken to me for 3 days because I'm curtailing their movement. And we all know what teenagers are like when you try and put limits on them. Oh my goodness. how are you navigating that? I mean, it's very early days, I know, but it's
Yeah.
tough.
Well, we're struggling, I have to say. It's we're I'm quite strict. I let them do plenty of things that are not strict that other people might not let them do, but I'm quite structured. And I think if they're doing school stuff, if they're supposed to be in school, then that's what they should be doing. Um, but equally, and I'm trying to work as well. I'm working full time, so I can't homeschool and set up lesson plans for them. But equally, I want them to exercise. So I'm making them do couch to 5K with me.
Well, where are you doing that?
Just around the roads, because we're not ill. I'm saying
Yeah.
it's fine for us to go out. We just won't engage with people while we're out. But it's really confusing for them, and I don't think they realise quite how frustrating it will get. Because potentially we could have to isolate Maddie for the 12-week period that they're saying elderly and sick people need to isolate, in which
Mm,
case they'll be climbing the wall, and so will I.
mm.
So we're just taking it a day at a time, and I'm trying to be gentle and not too heavy. They would say I'm being heavy-handed, but not too heavy-handed, because it's unprecedented.
It is completely unprecedented. It's new territory, isn't it, for all of us?
Yeah, it's a whole lifestyle change. But actually, if it is only 12 weeks and things start to settle down, we don't know that, but if it is, I keep telling myself that in 3-4 years' time, this will just be a blip on their landscape. It will not, they'll be upset about the loss of their summer activities now. But when they look back on it, they'll barely remember. They'll go, "Oh yeah, no, that was funny, wasn't it?" And that'll be the end of it. I know that. So they'll be fine.
I think that's a very good thing to think about, actually. One of the things I put on Twitter yesterday, and I got into a bit of trouble for it with one person. But if you think about it in the grand scheme of things, our ancestors went to war,
Mm.
and there are people living in war zones now. You've only got to look at people in Syria, who've had years and years of dodging bullets and bombs on a daily
Yeah,
basis. And yes, it's very hard that we've got to stay home, but look what we have. We have internet,
yeah,
we have television, we have Xbox, we have
yeah.
so many things, don't we, that enable us. And at the moment, I mean, I know people are stockpiling because they're worried, but we have good supply sources, and I don't think those are going to dry up overnight.
No, and as we go on, I imagine people will be ill and recover and be allowed to go shopping and do normal things without risk of affecting anybody else. And so there will be friends and neighbours and family around who can shop for us if we can't leave the house. I think everyone's just panicking because it's an unknown and we don't actually know where it's going to go. And some people, I used to be one of these actually. Maddie's diagnosis completely cured me of it. Some people are projecting forward and thinking in apocalyptic terms, I think. And that's why the panic buying, because people are thinking, God, the world might end. I really think there are some people who are worrying that everyone will die,
Mm,
which clearly, logically, isn't going to be the case.
mm.
So, yeah, I do see where people are coming from, and they are over worriers. And actually, I'm writing a blog post today. That's my job for today: is how to harness your anxiety as a family to get through this without the mental health implications that are then
Mm.
going to surface later on.
Yeah, one of the things I've been looking into is just, the techniques that we can use to try and manage that level of anxiety, and to try and get some sort of perspective, because as you say, in a few years' time we'll all look back on this and think, oh well, it wasn't so good, but we got through it. And I think, the human race is very good at survival, actually, and we will pull through this. And I mean, my cleaning lady came around yesterday, and she's quite young. Well, relative. She's in her 30s. She's quite young, but
God.
but she's from Poland, and she'd only just come back from Poland before they closed the borders in Poland. So she managed to get back to her children, and she was really sort of stressed, and she kind of looked to me, she said, you know, well, what do you think? You know, are you panicking? And I said, no, I'm not panicking, and I'm not worried about this from my perspective, and I'm not even worried about it from my child's perspective because he's healthy. But I am concerned that we all do what we need to do to protect people who are more vulnerable, and that, you know, like for Maddie, that vulnerability is invisible and people don't
Yeah.
know. So they'll assume that everything's right as rain, and that they can carry on as normal unless they see an older person, and then they'll steer clear of an older person. But it's not as
Mhm.
simple as that, is it?
No, exactly. And I think people very much misunderstand diabetes, both types actually, but no one really understands type 1 until they've got it. And it isn't just about taking your insulin and being sensible with what you eat. It really isn't. You can, you know, I was up twice in the night because she had a high blood sugar while she was asleep last night. And I don't know why that is. She might be fighting a virus. Maybe she's growing. You know, I don't know. But I do know that with illness, you can end up with blood sugars that are uncontrollable, and that then causes ketones in the blood, which can kill you. And that's why she would end up in hospital. Probably not for the ventilators, and it would be to be on an insulin and glucose drip to try and control the ketones. But no one understands that. I had no idea. I didn't know that beforehand. I thought it was just don't eat sweets and take 2 injections a day, but it's really much more complicated, and it is very, very dangerous.
Yeah, that's very tough. So do you have any tips for working from home? Because we're all going to be doing it.
Make sure you've got good Wi-Fi. I'm in this
Yeah.
undecorated room that we inherited because it's the only place I can guarantee decent Wi-Fi. I've put my husband onto that today. Make sure our Wi-Fi is up to scratch because the kids are all going to be watching Netflix, and we're trying to work. I think okay, so I work from home all the time, so I think distractions are the thing to manage. And for me, particularly, because I like a clean and tidy house, I like to stay on top of the household stuff. Otherwise, it sort of overloads me. Um, I have to put things like doing the washing. I have to put that into segments of the day at the beginning and end of the day, almost like I'm doing with the kids now. I'm kind of right. 8:30 till 6 I'm working, or 8:30 till 3 I'm working, and then I can, you know, then I've got to be with the kids, maybe less so now, and then cook some dinner, and then I might go back to work afterwards. But no washing. There's a thick dust in this room at the moment because I haven't done it for a couple of weeks. No washing, no dusting, no matter how much it bugs me. Blind eye between those hours. You know, set work hours. And I have another friend. She's got some kind of Facebook limiter.
Oh,
Um,
I've got that. The Facebook feed eradicator.
yeah, so actually, once you've hit play on Facebook and social media, it just switches off and you can't go there anymore.
Mm.
And then also, I get very stiff neck. I see an osteopath for my neck and shoulders. He says, set the kitchen timer every 20 minutes and get up from your desk and just take a minute to kind of wriggle and stretch and maybe do a little bit of physio exercises if that's what you've got.
Mm.
I go out for a dog walk every day. It's hard to pack it all in, but I think those regular breaks, especially now we've got fresh air and sunshine,
Mm.
and just stay away from everyone else.
Yes.
We're all on
Yeah.
the field, keeping 2 meters
I
apart.
know. I did sneak out for a run before 7 this morning, and I felt a bit guilty about it. I thought, I want to go
Yeah,
out, I want to get some steps in. So I went out. But the day before, I'd gone out for a run later in the day, and it was packed with people clearly doing exactly the same thing as me. And I was the
yeah,
only person who was thinking about social distancing. And in fact, I ended up, you know, stepping off the path and into the mud several times just to avoid people. So I hope people will wake up to the fact that, you know, 2 meters means 2 meters.
yeah. I was in a queue in Boots yesterday, futile, looking for some paracetamol. And every time, and a lady kind of came very close to me in the queue behind me, and every time I moved further away, she nudged closer to me. And in the end, I just stepped out of the queue and looked at her. And I think at that point, she kind of went, "Oh, okay, I know what you're doing." But it's hard, and we're so British. We don't want to say, "Excuse me, could you just stand over there, please?"
Well, I think we're going to have to. I think we're going to have to
Yeah.
start doing that, because we need to get that message. And actually, when I'm working from home, this is very naughty, this is my big admission. When I'm having my lunch, I'll sometimes watch Loose Women, because obviously that's kind of my age range that I'm trying to work with, as you are increasingly. So
Yeah.
I watched Loose Women, and nothing had changed. There was no flipping social distancing there on the panel. They weren't talking about it at all. And I just thought, you have such an opportunity to educate. You know, if you just practiced it and literally put a meter between each of you and still had your conversations,
Yeah.
that would be
That
such
was,
a powerful message, wouldn't it? But did they do it?
yeah.
No.
No. Do you know what though? I think people have just not thought about it yet. They have. It's not in their psyche at the moment. All people are thinking about is, have I got enough pasta, toilet roll, washing powder? Should I need to lock myself away for a couple of weeks? That's all they're on right now. And I noticed in the shops actually, it's fascinating. There's no pasta and rice, but I suspect that will come back quite soon because everyone's now finished buying that. They've got enough.
Yeah. Then we'll be inundated with
now,
pasta and rice.
yeah, but what there isn't now that there was plenty of before, by the end of the day, there's no chicken or fish. So people are now filling their freezers, I think. And then when that's finished and everyone feels like, okay, I've got what I need, maybe there'll be room in people's heads for, oh, I need to socially distance and I need to do this. I just think people are panicking and their heads are whirring with thoughts, and they're not settling on the things that they need to do on a daily basis. But it's, as we said before, it's unprecedented. It's really hard to function and stick to what the rules are. And also the rules aren't terribly clear yet.
No. I'm taking the approach that I just I'm socially distancing myself from everybody. And somebody said, take the approach that you already have the virus and behave as if you have the virus. And I thought that was actually quite powerful, because then it completely changes how you think about things, doesn't it? Because if you have it, then you are going to take those steps to protect the people around you.
Yeah, that's true.
But I can't now. My son is in New York. He's studying in New York. So if he were to need me, I can't get to him. And that's horrible. It's a horrible feeling, you know, really horrid.
Yeah, I bet. There must be lots of people in that situation. I mean, I'm
Lots.
lucky my kids are here with me. I can, albeit it causes them some angst, I can control them.
I wouldn't be able to control mine. No, he's 22. So, and he's very savvy, because he's half Chinese. And because his father has been in quarantine in Beijing for months already. So we've been really in the thick of this, like for months now. We've known what was coming. And he's normally at college in Shanghai. This year, fortunately, he's at college in New York, sort of, fortunately, not quite sure. But so he's had friends back in Shanghai who've been drip feeding him information the whole time, you know, so he's very aware, very savvy. Yeah.
He'll take care of himself. That's good.
I think so.
Is it very much lockdown over there?
Yes, and the schools have closed, certainly in New York, not across the States yet, but in New York, the schools are all closed. And I think they can still go out. They haven't been shut down like in France, but it's definitely sort of, I think it's the same sort of level of lockdown as we've got.
Gosh, well, let's just hope that it all works and that the virus settles down in the summer like the viruses tend to do. Let's hope it's one of those that does that. We're supposed to be in Canada in 2 weeks' time, skiing, but they've closed the borders as well, so that's not happening. So that's another reason my kids are frustrated about life. And they will remember that. They will remember the summer, the ski season that they had to cancel their lovely trip to Canada that we've had booked for ages. We've never been there before with them. They will remember that, but they will have had lovely holidays since that. That
Mm.
will happen, and lovely experiences, and their dance classes and their football will go back on eventually. It'll be okay.
It'll be okay. We'll get through it. The worst things have happened at sea.
Exactly. In fact, I spoke to my mom. My mom, bless her, is she's in a lot of pain. She has arthritis,
Mm.
so she very rarely leaves the house anyway. And we did joke that we'd all die, and Grandma would still be sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea because she's effectively in quarantine. Oh, anyway, she never sees anyone. Bless her. It's lonely. She's a worry because I don't want anything to happen to her because I can't get to her. But I did speak to her yesterday, and she said, I can't be bothered with washing my hands every 5 minutes. I'm not doing that.
Well, she doesn't need to if she's staying indoors, does she? Oh, bless her. Well, I've been trying to get my mum. Oh my goodness, the fights I've had with my mum about technology. I bought her an iPad a few years ago.
Oh yeah.
She used to be able to manage the laptop, but I don't know what's happened in the last 2 years. She's really switched off from it, so she doesn't check her email anymore, and she's just not interested. Which is very frustrating for me because, like you, I'm a blogger and I want her to read what I'm writing, and she doesn't. But anyway, or listen to the podcast and it's like, how do I do the
Yeah.
podcast?
Oh, I don't want my mum to listen to my podcast. That would be a disaster. I'd have to think about what I was saying.
But yesterday, over the last few days, I've been trying to get her to use FaceTime on the iPad because I think it would be so important that she'd be able to see faces and not just hear voices. And
Yeah.
finally, yesterday, we managed to do FaceTime, without either me helping her at that end or somebody else helping her at that end.
Oh, well
And
done.
it was like, wow, we managed to do it. It was like, brilliant, yes, whew, working.
Maybe to do it again, though. That's the question.
I want to do it with her every single flipping day so that it goes in.
Yes, exactly. My mum has an iPad and a mobile phone, but they're very rarely charged. And every time I
Oh,
go,
that's an issue too, the charging. Yes.
there's something wrong with them, and can I fix them? And the last time I went, the iPad was broken and wouldn't work. And the reason was she tried to charge the iPad by forcing the phone charger cable into it, and it had broken. And I had to get tweezers to pull the connection out of the iPad. Luckily, Apple are quite sturdy, and it was fine. But
Well
it's
done, iPad, wow.
all the time. So I despair. I don't think we're ever going to FaceTime. It's
That's
a
really
shame.
funny actually, because I've said to my mum, I said, look, unless you take a hammer to it, you can't actually break the iPad.
They're scared of them. They're scared of technology.
Yes. And I think it was also years of my dad not letting her touch anything technological. I mean, my dad was terrible with technology, but, even the telly and the speaker system and, he was the man who had control.
Yeah. Do you not think, though, that there is, I really think there's some weird aging thing that goes with technology, because already I can see the day coming when I'm going to have to ring my son and go, Evan, could you come over and put my television on for me? I don't really know how to work it. Because every time there's something new, I bought my husband a big screen TV for his birthday and had it installed on the wall because he'd been begging for it on the wall for a long time. And they came and they installed it, and I was like, please, can you set it up? Please, can you put all the Netflix and everything on there, because I really won't know what to do. And then I couldn't watch TV that day. I had to wait until it was his birthday. Can you set it up so I can watch it? Because I don't know how. And I'm sure I should probably just force myself to crack on, because what would I do if I wasn't married and he wasn't here? But
I think that's the key thing. Yeah, I think we have. It's very easy to say, oh, I'm too old for that, or to go into sort of technological dinosaur mode. I know a lot of women who do that.
Yes.
And it doesn't help us.
No, need to stop it.
Yeah, I get very cross actually with women who do that, particularly. The men do it a little bit, but women particularly, yeah. And the more we slip into that mindset now in midlife, the more difficult it will be for us later on. So
Yeah.
I get very frustrated with tech, but I'm flipping well going to beat it.
Yeah, yeah. Tech and money, those are the things that I sort of stick my head in the sand too frequently, and I need to be on it.
Yeah, yeah, you do. See, I can boast that I've built 3 websites since I turned 49. I'm like, hey,
Yeah, right. And we can do it then, clearly.
we can do
Oh,
it. We can. It might take us a bit longer, but we can do it. And but the frustrating thing for me is that I forget how to do things, and then I have to
mm,
relearn them all the time.
yes. And it is all on the internet. I'm just clearly figuring out how to edit a podcast in Audacity. I'm even using Audacity. And it's taken me a very, very long time, because all the information that you search for is, oh, right, that's 6 years out of date or
Yes.
whatever. But,
Oh yeah.
I've got that. And now I'm doing little tricks that I wasn't thinking to do before that makes it a lot faster and easier. So you can do it if it's the motivation, I think. You can do it if your motivation is there.
But when people talk about being, worried about early onset Alzheimer's, for example, or menopausal brain fog, it's
Mm,
actually when, because you're doing that, you're teaching yourself a quite difficult new technical skill that will be
mhm.
brilliant for your brain.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Yeah, well, that's why people do Sudoku. What is it? Oh, I've just started piano lessons, and that is a real mind twister.
Mm.
I'm very much tunnel vision. I can focus on one thing at a time. So I played flute growing up. One line of music, my fingers pressing the keys, easy peasy.
Mm.
Piano, not just 2 lines of music, but a couple of lines on each line. But actually, I'm thinking it's really, really good
Mhm.
for my mental acuity
Yeah.
to be doing this. So I'm going to stick with that. Maybe I'll be a grade 8 pianist by the time I'm 85.
I'm sure you will be. Okay, that brings us neatly on to the fact that, I know that you've had, a big birthday recently, and your thoughts have turned to midlife and aging and ageism and women and invisibility and all of that. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts on moving into midlife and ageism and how women get affected by that.
Yeah, well, it kind of took me by surprise, actually, because I don't think anybody thinks of themselves as any different, and it creeps up on you, doesn't it, that
Yes.
you're older. But I had one particular incident in a shop, and it wasn't a bad one at all. But I was in H&M, and the girl behind the checkout was maybe early 20s, and she said, "Did you get everything you came for today, love?" And to me, love, where I live, it's not, I know that I'm from Manchester originally, so I know that up north you get called love and duck quite a lot, and at any age will do that. But where I am, I feel like that is an indication that someone thinks of you as an older person.
Mm.
And I was quite shocked. And and I thought, the next thing someone's going to offer to help me with my bags. And that would be lovely, but I'm not ready for that implication. And of course, the other thing that happens the minute you turn 50, and I know this to be a fact, and I'll tell you why, but catalogues that come through the door
Yes.
stop being bravissimo and start being really ugly sandals. So I think one of the first posts I wrote after I'd written a bit of a kick off, I'm not having any of this, was how to find really nice shoes that are still comfortable. Because that's what I want. I don't want to wear
Mm.
ugly sandals. Not
Mm.
yet. I
Yeah.
know medically maybe one day I'll have to, but for now, no. Yeah, so I wrote a blog post, quite ragey blog post, about how I did not want to be seen as this old person who was not valid anymore. And at the time, I'd also been applying for part-time copywriting jobs, and I had had messages back saying no. That I can't remember what they said, but that indicated that I was too old for them. I would not fit in with their culture, whatever. And I was quite cross about that. And in fact, I went to a back to work kind of thing. It was for mums returning to work after a break, and it was a sort of coaching session. And I went to that, and people were asking questions. The woman was brilliant, And I stuck my hand up and I said, what if you've had a break to look after your family and you're over 50? And she completely blanked. She had no idea what to say to me. And eventually she said, well, ageism is probably even worse than sexism. That's even harder to get over. And then she moved on to the next question. I was horrified. And so I don't think I'm going to be able to change the landscape for older women trying to get back to work myself in the next 30 years, but I am going to model a life where being over 50 and indeed being over 70, if you want to be working and wear bright colours and nice shoes, that shouldn't be seen as unusual. You know, people look at Prue Leith and go, ooh, she's a bit garish, isn't she? But why? Why should they? They should, you know, this should be normal. I have people talking to me on Instagram all the time saying, God, I wish I had the confidence to wear the colours that you wear. Oh, well, just put them on.
Yeah.
Just wear them.
Yeah.
Actually, because it is entirely, and actually this is the nice thing about being a bit older, it is entirely down to us to be who we want to be. And no one can tell us that we need to slide off gracefully into old age. We can rip up the shoe catalogues and ignore the equity release plan emails,
and the Stannis Stairlift advert.
But yeah, just to explain how I know that this is a fact from advertisers, I was asked to speak on with Gransnet, actually, on a marketing panel at a marketing conference. And members of the audience were very interested, but they were all quite young, but they all said, we don't segment after the age of 50.
I know.
That is marketing practice.
I know.
We have, I don't know, we have teenagers, we have young adults, we have 18 to 30, we have 30 to 45, whatever, and then we have 50 to 80. And hell knows if you're over 80, what do you get? Nothing. And I was like, that's not okay. And I had Nadine Baggett on the panel with us, who's a beauty YouTuber, and she was saying, we women our age, we have disposable income. Why are you not trying to sell expensive skincare products to us? Why are you not representing our faces in the magazines? Because we're the ones that can afford to buy the products.
And if we control so much of the household disposable income, and yet we're ignored.
All you want to sell us is sandals.
Yeah. And incontinence pads.
Oh
dear. Oh dear. But I mean, Ashton Applewhite is one of my heroes, my shiro, the anti-ageism activist, and I've interviewed her on this podcast. And she posted, I remember, even when she went to the United Nations to talk about ageism, she was given a form to fill in that had her age. You know, you had to put your designated age category. And I think they did have up to 65, but it was 65 plus. And as anybody that works with older people knows, there's so much difference between a 60, 65-year-old and an 80, 85-year-old. And also, if you've seen one 80-year-old, you've seen one 80-year-old, because they're going to be completely different as well. So putting these, not accepting the fact that we actually get more diverse as we get older is just outrageous.
It really is. On that, there's a man who lives round the corner from me. I don't know him, but I see him jogging every day. He looks exactly the same age as my mum. My mum cannot move without her buggy because of her arthritis. This guy, he's hunched up and a bit wizened looking, but he's so fit. He runs every day. They're worlds apart, those two.
I'm on a mission to change all these stereotypes and labels that go with people, and it's just it's unnecessary and very limiting for everybody.
Totally. We all need it. We need to. And actually, these people that say to me, "I'm not confident enough to wear colour," well, actually, you need, if you want to, you need to, because you need to represent your age bracket in a positive light. if you want to wear black, absolutely. But if you don't be told by a caricature and a stereotype that you have to settle into a particular way of being. Do represent your age group the way you want it to be represented.
Mm. It's so important, because then we stop the invisibility of our age group, don't we?
Yeah, completely. And I do think in previous generations that is what happened. They just quietly, I guess it happened more naturally. My mum didn't really work. She worked a little bit from home. But she basically was very domestic. She was a 50s housewife. And so as you age and your bones start to ache a bit, then you're going to naturally, there's nothing there for you to get out there and do. You're going to naturally settle into retirement. But the thought of retirement for me in this day and age, well, I don't have enough money for it, for one, but equally my brain cells I would just end up eating cake and drinking wine all day, because I'd be so bored. I need to work, and I feel like I will still need to work. And because we are able to work online and digitally, and we don't have to go out and pick fruit and stack shelves. I mean, some people have to stack shelves, and maybe they're ready to retire at 65. I don't know. Maybe they are. But I suspect they'll all come home and go, right, now what shall I do? I've been busy. I think, honestly, so much depression in older age groups because retirement involves going from doing everything. In fact, I'll tell you that my brother took early retirement, a very, very stressful, big career, lawyer, retired at 60, was always quite happy, and suddenly found himself quite depressed because had no intellectual stimulation. At 60, we're still looking for things to do. We're not declining.
No. I mean, I personally believe if we have our health, we get better with age. Until, right at the end of life, where obviously there will be some decline, I think we get better with age, not worse. And I really want the world to start appreciating that.
Yeah, and even with physical decline, I mean, I have my mum's problem. I've inherited her. I will have arthritis and things like that, and I have a lot of pain. But I just alter how I do things. I don't stop doing them because that would just feel like giving up. That would be too depressing. Hence the cake and wine.
And often, sometimes the pain. I mean, it may not be in your case, but for a lot of people, the pain is kind of a warning from the body that we actually need to move more. We do need to get up and move around. I interviewed one lady. She's in her 70s and she's a qigong master. And while we were talking, she had her Pomodoro timer on her computer go off every 20 minutes, 20, 30 minutes. And then she made me get up as well. And she stood up and come on, we're going to shake. We're going to do a whole body shake and lift our legs up and our arms up and everything. That helps to keep some of the aches and pains of aging at bay. And certainly we just need more movement, not less often, don't we?
Yeah, definitely. I see an osteopath regularly, and he said that to me. Just make sure you're moving regularly. Go for a walk a couple of times a day, even if it's just 5 minutes around the block. You just need to keep moving. And strength. You need strength training to support your joints.
You've just launched this podcast, and it's very exciting, and the timing is a little crazy, but even so, it's going really well. It's all about teenagers, isn't it? I love the title, Teenage Kicks. That's so cool.
Yeah, well, I chose Teenage Kicks because it kind of epitomizes all of it from my point of view. Teenagers do get a bit kicky, but equally, there's a lot of knocks and kicks that teenagers take. And equally, their emotions are heightened, and they do get a kick out of life. So it just is perfect for my purpose.
So what are you doing? I know you're interviewing. You're not interviewing teenagers, are you?
No. So I thought about this for a long time. Basically, the premise of the podcast is, as when you're raising younger children, you can find anecdotal advice on the internet very, very easily. Everybody likes to spew what's going on in their children's lives because it makes them feel better when someone reflects that back and says, yeah, me too. In fact, mine's even worse. And then you feel better. And you know, semi-medical things as well. You get the advice on Facebook. Well, actually, you know, my kid has done that as well and has come through it. Like the whole toddler tantrums. Yeah, it's a tough stage of life, and I sympathise. Try and take some time for yourself. You know, you get all this advice. It's great. And then as soon as your kids get old enough to be able to read what you write about them on the internet, because they have Instagram accounts, or their friends have started subscribing to your blog, that's even worse. Their friends can read what you say about them. You have to stop. So there is nothing, very, very, very little anecdotal support on the internet for parents of teenagers. And I struggled with how to change that. And I did think in the podcast about, should I ask my daughter's friends if they'd like to be interviewed? And then I thought, well, no, because actually there's going to be legal implications to that because they're under 16. I'm going to have some kind of legal agreement with their parents. Too complicated. So then I thought about asking other parents, but for exactly the same reason as it's not online, they're not going to want to be honest and open about their kids. And then I thought, what if I interview people who had things that were difficult in their lives when they were teenagers, but now they're adults and they're through the other side and they're in a good place. And so they can offer perspective to anyone that might be going through similar at the same time, and hopefully a light at the end of the tunnel to tell them that and actually most of my guests do always say, hang in there. That's what I'd say to that 14-year-old that was struggling. Hang in there, it is going to get better. So I've got lots of different things that we're tackling. The first episode is a brilliant one about a lady who was expelled from school when she was 14. And whilst there may not be a lot of people who've been expelled, there'll be lots of people who've struggled with detentions and possibly exclusions at school and are worrying about where that might end up. So she offers a lovely perspective on how she eventually got through her exams despite the fact she'd been chucked out of school, and nailed her dream job and has a very normal, good life now. So that was lovely. I chatted to a lady who self-harmed as a teenager, and I know that's a real thing at the moment. Lots of people are doing that at school at the moment. But that was probably one of my nicest interviews, actually, because although she was very candid about what had happened and how it went wrong, she also really turned it around eventually and has a lovely life now and a really lovely outlook on life. So that's a really nice one to listen to. I've got someone who's a young carer, and I think that's quite a common situation. I think 1 in 5 kids are young carers now. I was quite shocked by that statistic.
Yeah.
So what these people do when I talk to them, I think it's quite cathartic. In fact, some of them say it's cathartic to talk about it. I think for anyone listening who's in a similar position, it is probably quite cathartic to hear someone express what they are currently feeling, and in fact, I've got goosebumps thinking about it now. Be able to say, to have someone say, I know what you're going through. I know what you're feeling right now. I've felt that. It's going to be okay. I think that's really powerful.
And actually, that message that you're putting across is perfect for our situation now, isn't it? In that we will look back in the future, and if somebody else is going this, we'll say, oh yes, we remember the pandemic of 2020 and it will be okay. We will get through it. It will be okay.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I'm writing my blog post today. I've found a few people on Facebook actually who've talked to me about one of them, her daughter got swine flu. And I remember swine flu was a big concern for a lot of people when that was huge. Her daughter was hospitalised with swine flu. And so she's talked to me about how that, it wasn't great, but she recovered completely, and everything's fine. So she's got a perspective to offer on how you get through that, because I think most of the worry now is because most of us have never experienced anything like it. So hopefully it'll be evergreen, because these things will happen again in 10 years' time. Hopefully someone will find my blog post and go, okay, here's 10 tips for getting through this really difficult pandemic situation.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, share it, and leave me a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening. You can find out more information about this episode in the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you'll find strategies, support, and resources to help make your midlife magnificent. Why not sign up for a midlife breakthrough call with me to get clarity on how to make the most of your next chapter? Don't get stuck in what can sometimes be the messy middle. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.